So, good morning, friends. A hearty welcome to all of you today to the next edition of the VDMA CEO's Thought Leadership Series. And a pleasure for me today to welcome Mr. Ulrich Greiner Prachter, CEO Region India and Asia Pacific and Managing Director of SMS India Private Limited. I would like to briefly introduce Mr. Prachter first. Mr. Prachter has done his mechanical engineering degree from Otto von Guericke University in Magdeburg. He has, friends, 3 decades of diversified experience of business strategy, project management, engineering, product innovation, and process automation. He joined SMS India in 2011 as the Chief Technology Officer. And presently, as I mentioned, he's the CEO, Region India and Asia Pacific and Managing Director of SMS India Private Limited. Hearty welcome to you, Mr. Prachter, and thank you for joining us for this edition of the VDMA CEO's Thought Leadership Series.
Thank you, Mr. Nath. Much appreciated to be invited. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Prachter. Mr. Prachter, we are in the midst of the second wave of COVID, which has impacted not only the economy, but also the companies. So what I wanted to understand from you, Mr. Prachter, is how is the SMS Group in India coping with the second wave of COVID? And going forward, how do you see the new normal at SMS India, Mr. Prachter?
Okay, we have about 2,000 people here in India, and we had from March of last year to March of this year, we had about 100 cases of COVID infections. Many of them were just tested positive, but a few colleagues were also seriously ill. And from middle of March of this year until today, we have added another about 170 cases. And unfortunately, also 2 of our colleagues died from the effects of this coronavirus. But now the numbers are better. We are doing today a vaccination drive in our office, so we're going to vaccinate a lot of our colleagues who are younger than 45, so they have been eligible only since the beginning of last month. And we are working from home since, again, middle of March. And but slowly now people are coming back to the offices. But we have learned a lot in this last year. We have learned that it's not so important at which location people are working. A lot of things can be done with digital technologies, with new means of communication. And but it still doesn't replace the feeling that you have when you meet in person and when you have a discussion group where you can look each other in the eye and come up with solutions, come up with decisions.
Right, right. So going ahead, Mr. Prachter, do you feel that the work from home would continue for some time at SMS India?
For some people, yes.
Okay.
It's so our setup here, we have a lot of people who work in engineering. So there you can easily set tasks that can be done from home. Also, I think across India, the connectivity through the internet, through broadband, or even mobile. Some of our colleagues who are in villages close by to our headquarters are using mobile connections. So even that works. Also in Kolkata, some people use mobile connections. And so, yes, I think it will be a mix. It will be a mix. But I can tell you that for most of our colleagues, they are also looking forward to the day when they can come back to the office and interact with friends and colleagues. So we will have a mix, as I said, where we follow the rules for social distancing and these things until the situation with the COVID virus is over, or let's say at least alleviated. I don't know whether it will in the next couple of years disappear. I don't think so, but we will learn to live with it.
Absolutely, Mr. Prachter. Yeah. Mr. Beshta, let's come to the steel industry. Now, as per the National Steel Policy 2017, the crude steel production in India is expected to reach about 255 million tons by 2030, Mr. Beshta. We are presently at around, I think, 110, 112 million ton of crude steel. Now, the compounded annual growth rate required, Mr. Peshta, is about 7.5, 8% to attain this target. So, what I wanted to ask you, Mr. Peshta, is this target too optimistic, or do you feel it is realistic for India to attain this target?
I feel it's a little bit too optimistic. I don't think we will see an addition of 7.5% of capacity on on a yearly basis. I do see that India will catch up because
Right.
India has, also because of its big population, a relatively low steel consumption per capita. But India has so much potential. So I think we'll see a significant increase, but not to the extent as formulated in that national policy.
National Steel Policy. Right, right. Mr. Peshta, also the steel industry, it is a capital intensive sector. Almost, I think, 7,000 crore is required to set up 1 ton of steel making capacity through the greenfield route. Now, cost of capital in India, Mr. Peshta, is high when we compare to some of the other countries, especially when we look at China or Japan or Korea. So, for the growth of the steel industry, Mr. Bester, what do you feel? Is it the public sector companies which will drive the growth, or do you feel it will be the private companies which are going to drive the growth of the steel industry in India?
Well, I feel it will be more from the private side. I think the government had SAIL basically had a very ambitious plan. They added a lot of capacity in the last, let's say, 15 years. And some of these plants, they still need to reach their full capacity. So I believe that the private, we see the movement right now. There's a lot of private companies coming up with plans for setting up steel facilities, steel making facilities, steel processing facilities. And that's probably owed to the fact that the steel price is very, very high at the moment, that we also see that China, which is the biggest producer of steel, is reducing capacities and going into a different direction. They have also a 5-year plan, and they want to reduce the iron ore based steel making and want to increase the scrap based steel making. So through recycling means. And I think in India there's also, Tata has the same plan. They have their own brand name now for scrap recycling, and they will be, as most of the cases, again a trailblazer for the Indian steel industry. They will set up facilities to process scrap in India.
Right. In fact, Mr. Preshta, the Indian government is also contemplating the vehicle scrappage policy, and it is expected to come out. So, how do you feel? How would that impact the steel industry in India, Mr. Preshta?
It will impact the steel industry because consumption will go up, and then again, there is 2 ways of making steel. You can do it straight from the natural resource iron ore, or you recycle. And for recycling, you need scrap. And India doesn't have a lot of scrap because, as we all know, Indians are very cost conscious. They save things, they repair things, they maintain things, and they don't throw things easily away like it is quite customary in some of the Western societies. So I think this vehicle scrapping policy will add to, let's say, the need to have facilities for recycling of scrap and then producing new steel with the scrap.
Right, right. Mr. Peshta, you mentioned earlier also about the low capital labor productivity in India. So it is only about, I think, 90 to 100 tons, whereas in some of the more major steel producing countries, it goes up to 600 to 700 tons per man per year in countries like Japan, Korea. So, Mr. Bester, is that can we say, is that the issue of productivity in India, or is it due to technology, and maybe a second part I would like to add, Mr. Pester, is how do you foresee digital technology, Industry 4.0, IoT? Would that play a role in the steel industry in India in the years to come?
Well, let me address first productivity. I think
Yeah.
if you look at the genesis of the Indian steel industry, it started for at least for Tata and one more plant in Burnpur before independence. After independence, it was government planning, setting up the steel plants of SAIL, and there was, I mean, the aim was a dual aim, I would say. It was to set up industrial clusters that would form around these steelmaking facilities. And at the same time, also, they have a social function. They provide employment, they provide to people the ability to learn new skills. And I think if you look at the Indian steel industry, that social aspect has always been there. Right. Tata's town and plant, the town is built around the plant. If you look at what Mr. Sajjan Jindal has done in Toranagalu, that is quite reminiscent of what these famous utopian capitalists did in England in the Industrial Revolution at that time. So again, building a plant, setting up a plant to produce steel, and at the same time building a city around it and providing a lot of services to the people that work there. So I think that is partly one of the reasons why you have a lower productivity, because you simply employ more people. And JSW has, for example, I think it's the company in India with the lowest percentage of labor cost per ton of steel. Other companies have higher. I think all the government companies like RNL and SAIL, they employ higher number of people and they have a higher cost of labor per ton. But in general, that's something that needs to be considered. And at the same time, we see two developments in India. We see that you still have areas where you have labor-intensive production of steel, but at the same time, companies are going ahead and employing digital technologies. We have such digital technologies. We are working with the big steel producers, with again JSW and Tata. We have an order from JSW to employ a digital solution for the management of a semi-finished semi-finished product yard for JSW. So I think the Indian steel industry is moving in that direction, moving in the direction of utilizing IoT and Industry 4.0, but at the same time, they don't forget about their social responsibility. So you will always see areas where people are employed.
Right. But then it's going to be always a sort of a mix of social responsibility and automation or digitization, Mr. Pester, in India.
It has all, in my view, it has always been like
that. Right. Mr. Pester, how is the, I was seeing on the SMS on your internet page that SMS as a group is going quite active in the IoT Industry 4.0 digitization. Now, your factory in India, Mr. Pester, what are the steps being undertaken there? Would you look at going for more automation in the factory, in the manufacturing also in India?
We have done that. We have a very, very strong electrics and automation group here in India, and they do a lot of software programming. And we also have a group that looks into data science and digital applications. And this particular group, they have developed for our factory in Koda and Bhubaneswar, they have developed a job tracking system. So there's a digital tool available for the tracking of the work in the Bhubaneswar workshop. And that takes the data from the machines directly from the SAP for the production planning and gives the management of the plant directly an overview of where they are at with the particular jobs that they're working on.
Okay. Okay. So you can do the remote monitoring, condition monitoring also from there, Mr. Pester?
Yes, we have. For example, again, that's owed to the pandemic. It is very difficult now to do
Right.
final inspections of equipment that is made here in India. We have just finished equipment for a major project in the United States, and the final testing at our workshop in Bhubaneswar plus the final quality inspection was done with digital means, which
Right.
is a little
Wow.
bit more difficult because
Right.
it takes you a day to do the rehearsing before you can actually then do it with the customer. But once you are used to it, I think it will be a tool that will be employed in the future also.
Right, right. So I think interesting times ahead, Mr. Pester, then with the
I think
digitization.
so. I think so.
Right, right, right. Mr. Pester, there's a general conception that we are moving perhaps away from globalization and going towards more regionalization or national interests playing a role. There are trade wars, what we have seen, which have impacted the economy. Now, India has also come out with the Atma Nirbhar or the self-reliant, self-resilient India policy. What are your views here, Mr. Pester? Are we making the world actually, rather than globalizing, are we looking more at local interest, or what should be the step forward, Mr. Pester?
I think the globalization of the economies cannot be undone. But at the same time, if you want to, you know, have more skills in your own country, and you need to make products that you need to substitute imports for products that you make in your own country. And I think we have done the right step, is putting up our factory in Bhubaneswar. And now we are working for projects all over the world. It's not just for. Initially, the thought was we serve the Indian customers through our factory here, but now there's a lot of export jobs from India, and only if you do things locally, then you learn the skills and you get to employ the technologies that are needed to have products that can make it on the world market.
Right, right. And Mr. Pester, also, since you have the factory, you will be having local suppliers. Many MSMEs must be supplying also to your factory. So, do you feel these steps of the Indian government with Atma Nirbhar Bharat or the production linked incentive schemes, would that help in the development of the local industry and MSME structure also?
It does help. It does help, and also our customers are helping, because
Right.
also the pressure from our customers is to substitute imports and make them locally. And we have a very good vendor base. It's not that we are serving our customers here in India only through our workshop. Our workshop only does a selected pieces of equipment. Most of our equipment that we are supplying to our customers, we are sourcing locally here in India. So the import ratio is actually quite low for us.
Right, right. If we were to come to the local skills available, Mr. Pester, you have worked in the international market in various countries. So, how do you see the skill level of the workforce in India when you compare it to some of the other countries, Mr. Pester?
I wouldn't, say that Indian labor. There's expert. It's just in India you have more people doing a job that in other countries is done by one or two. You have generally a more labor-intensive approach, but ingenuity is also is quite astonishing. I mean,
Right.
in one of our offices in Italy, SMS Italy, they have one meeting room called Jugaad. And there's
Okay.
a reason for it, because the Italian colleagues were quite impressed with the solutions that the Indian colleagues come up, and they work together at various job sites here.
Right, right, right. And your SMS India is also doing engineering work, Mr. Pester, for the SMS global projects also from here?
Yes, we have for certain products, uh, the, not the entire engineering, but in some areas up to 75% of the engineering is done here in India. So we have departments here in our office that are basically physically located in India, but they're working for the German office. So they get their work from Germany and they supply their work product to Germany. So they're just, I always tell my German colleagues, they're your boys. They just happen to sit in India.
Okay, okay. And the interaction, there is no intercultural issues between the Indian engineers and their German counterparts, Mr. Bester?
No, we have programs for that. For if you have new areas where you work together, but some of these colleagues, they are working together and they're working for the German offices since the late 90s.
Okay.
So there's and our industry is also, we are, a lot of people talk about job rotation and having new challenges in their work, but for many of our engineers, what is required is experience. So we want them to do the same thing for a long period of time, and we have many people here that have been working for us for 20, 25 years and working on the engineering of the same products. Obviously, with some development, but again, what is important is experience.
Experience, right. Mr. Bester, you've been in India now for almost a decade, 10 years or so.
More than a decade, yes.
More than a decade, very good. So if I were to ask you, Mr. Bester, one or two things what you feel has changed in India in the last 10 years, maybe one point which has been changed for the better and one which has not been so good.
Well, I think many things have changed.
Right.
I always tell the story that in Calcutta, when I came the first time to Calcutta and stayed somewhere in a hotel in downtown in Chowringhee, and our office is on the outskirts, close to you, and new areas, and it took almost 2.5 hours sometimes to get to the office. But now it takes less than 45 minutes, I think. Right. So the infrastructural development is there in India, and I've seen that everywhere. I think in general there's a remarkable development in India. The use of digital technologies. India is I think, quite advanced compared to other countries in utilizing such technologies. India is famous for, let's say, its software industry. I think that's how my Indian colleagues are perceived also in our worldwide organization. Oh, the guys from India, they're the ones that, are best in software and digital technologies. So that India has made a remarkable progress in those couple of years. But you still have some areas where, let's say, some areas of the country that haven't been touched by that. And again, owed to the size of India, that is a process that will take a little bit longer.
Right. And in what way India could have improved, Mr. Bester? Maybe one point there where you feel India could have done better on certain aspects?
Well, I think you have one of the, if not the biggest railway network in the world. Right. And I think that is a huge asset, which is, in my view, underutilized in India, especially as this could be utilized to relieve some of the pressure that you have on your other infrastructural network. On the other hand, it's quite amazing. I'm telling my colleagues in Europe, in the years that I'm in India, how many airports have been either newly built or replaced in relatively short time, and smoothly working right after startup. So I think that's something that in other countries you don't see in that way.
Right. And Mr. Bester, now with the I think I just lost you, Mr. Bester. Yeah.
No, I got a call.
Okay. So, Mr. Bester, after the first or last year, after the COVID hit us, we had quite a strong recovery. How do you see the steel industry, Mr. Bester? Has it also picked up for you, the number of orders that SMS has got after the pandemic?
For us, we are seeing something that we haven't seen for many years, that we haven't seen from the mid-noughties, I would say, 2005, 2006, 2007. Okay. Everywhere in the world, people are coming with new steel projects. We have 2 major steel projects hot rolling mills here in India. There are more to come. There are more entrepreneurs who are approaching us for steel making facilities or processing facilities. And I feel it's a bit the industry is a little bit overheating. And you also see that if you followed the news on the results that have been published by JSW and Tata, they had the financial success, the best results in their history. I think at least for Tata, it was Tata Steel, the best result in their history. So obviously they will use some of that money to invest in new facilities.
Right. So it's a good time for the steel makers and the equipment manufacturers then.
It is right now. It's a good time, but again, there's two sides to a coin, because I think if the industry is overheating, then also that will put pressure on the prices of the equipment and the raw materials that we procure to make our equipment, and that will then also put us a little bit under pressure. Also, people will scramble for manufacturing facilities. I think it's a good opportunity for India again to make one more step, that people come to India. We're promoting Make in India in this region here, and people are waking up to the fact that you don't have to get everything from China or Korea. You can get it also from India.
India, right, right. In fact, you mentioned about the raw material prices, Mr. Bester. Now, this is one of the concerns for the industry, because the raw material prices have been increasing. In fact, even the machinery manufacturers are facing a little bit of heat with the raw material prices increasing. So how do you see the trend? Because in these difficult times, it is very tough for the machinery manufacturers to increase their prices also.
Well, the trend is that we have to live with it for some time, especially because of that. I don't know how other sectors are impacted by COVID, and what the recovery of COVID after COVID looks like in, let's say, oil and gas or mining. And but in general, I think we have to face the heat for some time. But at the same time, in the medium term, I mentioned earlier that China wants to get away from iron ore-based steelmaking to more scrap-based steelmaking. So I think there will be some relief later, maybe this year, maybe next year, on the prices of raw materials. Right. And then also that will go hand in hand with lower steel prices.
Right, right. Coming to the last question for today, Mr. Bester, the pandemic or the COVID has been quite a challenge for the companies as well as for the workforce. It has also been quite tough for the CEOs leading the organizations, Mr. Bester. So what we would like to understand from you, Mr. Bester, 3 tips how CEOs can steer their company in these difficult times of COVID. And I'm sure these tips would be of extreme value to our German companies here in India, as well as to all our viewers, Mr. Bester.
I think what is very important, that you stay in touch with your people, that you have meetings with them, that you address the groups, that they feel that there is a connection with the management of the company, and that is very important. Communication is probably one of the most important things. The other thing, what we have done is we want our people to feel safe, to feel that they have been taken care of by the company. So we have a number of programs. It starts with, let's say, vaccination drive is an easy thing, but we also have a policy now. If there's a fatality in the family, how we continue to support that family, even if they lose a family member that works for the company. And that is much appreciated by our people, because they feel that there's one less worry. If really something happens to me during this pandemic, the company will take care of my family. And the last thing I would say, we have really learned to utilize these new technologies, and we are using them also to create a different work environment. As I said, a mix between office work from home. We have made sure that all our colleagues have proper and fast internet access to use these new tools and to do their work.
Right. So if I were to sum up, Mr. Peshta, the 3 points what you mentioned is, one is communicate, stay in touch with your people.
Yes.
Then support the workforce, also give them a feeling of safety and the assurance that the company is supporting them. And also about the new technology, using the new technology for the work environment also as we go
Yes.
ahead. Right, right. So, Mr. Beshta, thank you so much for joining us on the show today, and it has been a pleasure interacting with you. And on behalf of the German Engineering Federation, VDMA, wishing the SMS Group in India a lot of success, and to yourself and your team also, Mr. Beshta. Stay safe, stay well, Mr. Beshta.
Same to you, and thank you for the opportunity to speak here.
Right. And do stay in connect with VDMA. We do a lot of events, Mr. Beshter, also on the webinar formats and all.
Yes, I've seen that, and wherever I feel that our people should participate, I distribute it widely so they come and join you in these webinars in order to learn things or hear how other people are doing things.
All right. Right. Right.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Goodbye,
you.
Mr.
Bye.
Yeah. Stay. Thank you. Bye.